Open letter to Helen Zille. Kay Sexwale.
Now, part of the next conversation is about the Maseru massacre and the commemoration. But before we get here, let's start here. Communications consultant and public commentator Kay Sexwale wrote an open letter in the Sunday newspaper titled Dear Helen Zille, a call for an end to divisive leadership and unpatriotic behavior. Now, Helen Zille is the Democratic Party federal chairperson. We did invite her for a right of reply, which she declined. Kay Sexwale joins us in studio to expand on this letter. Very good evening to you. Welcome.
Good evening, Paul. Thank you for having me.
I mean, this was a very heavily worded letter as you expressed your views, talking about the double standards, the racial bias that you see within Helen Zille. Talk to us a little bit about some of these factors and your observations.
Okay, so Helen Zille was here last week,
yes.
And spoke to Clement Manyathela last week Tuesday or
yes.
so, and I watched it and I was quite intrigued by the interview. I only caught it on Wednesday on the internet, and I was quite intrigued by the type of views that she expresses that are so divisive for the country, and most alarming, her unpatriotic views around, our relations with the U.S., the AGOA partnership, and so on, and saying that, if the DA is not part of the GNU, then the United States would withdraw AGOA from South Africa. And I just found that very alarming and very divisive, and also very unpatriotic of her. Shocking as it was, she also, earlier this year, as you may be aware, her party, even if it's not her personally, her party advanced a view that the United States should interfere in the South African elections. And that, to me, was another sign of high unpatriotism by the Democratic Alliance. And, I also addressed her issues around racial relations within her own party and also within society at large. In her party, we have seen that people are dealt harshly when they are black, and yet white people get away with all kinds of nonsense. Yeah. So for me, that was a glaring, it was a glaring issue. And so I wrote to her triggered by the interview, but obviously I did expand more on issues more than what she said in the interview as well.
Mm-hmm. You say that her actions frequently expose racial segregation and that approach prioritizing South Africa's white minority.
Yes, absolutely. You can hear it from their policy advancements as the DA. You can also see the partnerships that they formed of late with AfriForum and Solidarity in fighting the GNU itself and also fighting the president. And also all sorts of other things that the party gets up to.
You've spoken about undermining national sovereignty and treason as well, as you speak and express some of the views around these remarks and the impact that they have. What do you say? What do you think it says for brand South Africa, from someone who may be watching from the outside? What does it say about brand South Africa? I mean, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa on global stages speaking to the GNU, the unity, bringing confidence to investors to come and inject some money in South Africa so that the country's fortunes can be turned.
She is completely undermining those efforts that are made by the president and by the other ministers within the cabinet. So the Minister of Trade and Industry, for example, the views that that minister advances with regard to trade in South Africa and bringing foreign investment to the country. Helen Zille's statements undermine all of those efforts. You saw her utterances, or those of the DA, as well as people like John Steenhuisen, who I would assume, or my assumption is that they take their marching orders from her because she's firmly in charge of the DA. You saw the statements that they made, for instance, when the president was speaking on the Russia issue and also speaking to the Russian president, and they said, no, that is no friend of ours, that is no friend of South Africa. And I find it very alarming that they say these things, in spaces that show up the president and that show the disrespect to his authority and to his leadership. Why are they in a partnership if they are not prepared to work hand in hand on foreign policy? So why don't they raise some of these issues up front, iron them out, and then go with the line of government in terms of what government policy is, because that is what you do. So, for instance, if you're a member of a party and you disagree with the party policies, etc., and you're not only a member of the party, but a leader of the party, a member I can understand, but a leader of a party that then goes and speaks against your own party, for instance, to say this and this and this is something that I disagree with, yet the party line is a particular line.
Yeah.
So obviously government has policies as a government.
We were already sort of, preempting a lot of these clashes around policy, for one, because the GNU was described as being a fragile agreement right at the beginning. What do you think, and in terms foresee for this partnership with the DA? Because, I know that it's been said that the partnership can do without it.
Definitely, I think the partnership can do without the DA. That's my personal view. However, I understand to some extent why this was a choice that was made. It's not necessarily one that I agree with. I also feel that if you go into a coalition partnership with people, you should go into a coalition partnership where people are not destructive in terms of the objectives which you're trying to advance as a government. And Helen Zille has undermined this partnership even before things were signed. The wrangling that happened in the build-up to the GNU being solidified, you saw the arguments that she was having, coming on public platforms, etc. It's the theatrics, the media theatrics, that I find very astounding, and people really just need to take them on and say something. But, silence is not an option for us anymore.
Yeah. We, right at the beginning of our chat, I introduced the Marikana massacre, Maseru massacre. And I know that it's quite personal for you. You were 8 years at the time, and you managed to survive it. Talk to us a little bit about your personal experience and just give us insight on how you felt and what it means to you now as you reflect.
So I was 8 years old, as you mentioned, during the Maseru massacre in 1982. And 42 people were killed on that day. I think it's very important to always mention that number, because it's a lot of people. 30 of them were South African cadres of the Umkhonto we Sizwe military unit of the ANC. And our house was one of the targeted houses during that raid. It started at about 1 a.m. And I'm not sure what time I woke up, but it was in the middle of the night and it was very dark. And there was fire all around us and loud sounds, and we were very scared as children. So I was sharing a room with the daughter of my parents' comrades, a young lady now, she's called Nomakari. And I was sharing a room with her at the time at our house, and we were woken up and very shocked at what was happening. And we initially thought it was a fire only. We didn't realize that the house was under attack. And it's only when my father walked into the room to find us all confused, where he shouted, that we must just get down. And we'd been playing war games as children. And we thought they were games, but it was actually not a game. When my father had trained us to react in a particular way when he shouted the word down. So we knew that we had to, belly crawl and stay on the ground. Then we knew that the house was under attack. So it was a very shocking experience as a child. I was injured during that massacre. And my childhood ended that day, effectively.
As you reflect on it today, as you talk about it, you obviously recalling yourself at the time. What does it mean to you?
So what it means to me is a lot of things. I look at the status quo now in South Africa and the reason why we were even in such a situation as a family. I also look at other people who gave up a lot, who gave up their youth and their childhoods, etc., to fight apartheid in South Africa and to fight for a democratic government. So some of the things that I see happening today make me question whether those sacrifices were in vain when we hear of certain issues that happen and that are problematic in society, such as corruption and other issues, as well as the infighting that you see as the ANC splits into many different splinters. And that really concerns me because I ask myself, okay, so what was this for? So when I say that, we also have to remember, though, that the ANC did not fight for a one-party state. The ANC fought for democracy. So I think it's also important to note that although I'm disappointed at the actions of some people who are or were ANC leaders, I also respect the fact that the objective of a true democracy has been achieved. So that I do commend my people, all of us, that we have managed to, stay the course. But there are these disruptive elements that we spoke about, such as Helen Zille, going to foreign powers, etc., and trying to disrupt democracy.
As the ANC splits, we know that there are quite a number of significant events taking place within this month. You mentioned the MK, Umkhonto weSizwe, but this is a different version. Yes. Umkhonto weSizwe Party under Jacob Zuma, celebrating and marking its one-year anniversary. That's happening on the 16th. The EFF has its National Elective Conference on the 14th, and the ANC on January 8th, of course, reflecting its birthday celebrations. How do South Africans engage with these events, as you mark the splinters and speak about democracy? I mean, this reflects the democracy.
Absolutely. So I feel that South Africans are spoiled for choice, really, if you will. But we need to bear in mind that these are ANC splinters. So the question that I always ask myself is, are we better off with the ANC splintering, or should it be reunited again? That's a global question that I think the ANC and those splinter parties need to ask themselves. Now, when we look at these events that are upcoming, so for instance, the EFF conference that's coming up, the elective conference, it's going to be quite a watershed one because they've never had so many problems in the past as they have now in terms of the different issues that are swallowing them up, if you will, such as the MK. But what I find interesting is that the damage is not as huge as it's publicly made out to be, the damage to the EFF by MK. Simply because you would see, I've worked in political communication for a while, and you would see it if the membership was hurting, if people were leaving the EFF, you would see it. We see leaders leaving. But have you seen events where you have like a broad number of people being paraded to say these people are coming and joining us? We don't see that. We're seeing leadership breakaways.
Well, the assumption is that the leader will leave with their people.
I'm not so sure. The people have not said anything about leaving with them. So, for instance, if you look at Floyd Shivambu, yes, there are some people that have expressed that they're leaving with him, but it's not like the masses of the EFF. It's not the broad masses. So his reasons for leaving, are his reasons. We hear different versions of that. But I also think that the public perception that they're being hurt too badly, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. And also the MK party, you look at the electoral wins in the national elections and the provincial elections, they did extremely well, far better than anybody had anticipated, particularly in KZN. However, you see in the by-elections now that they don't have as much, as much inroads as they had then with the national and provincial elections. So then I ask myself, is this party going to survive beyond its leader?
Very important question. And perhaps that rounds up our conversation. With that question, will the party survive? Of course, the MK party marking its one-year anniversary a little later this month. Wrapping up that conversation with Kay Sexwale, who joins us here, of course, having spoken about various issues.